Now I will transition us over to Associate Chief Angela Coleman. Angela, welcome.
Thank you, Katie, and I hope that you all can hear me okay this afternoon. I know I have a booming voice anyway, so I'm just hoping that you all can hear me really well. It is wonderful to be here with you. Very good to see, well, I wish I could see all of you, but it's great to be with you even virtually. These engagements are very important to us. We need to continue to try to keep you updated on all the things that we're undertaking, and most importantly, give you the big why of why we're undertaking things. And these are more important than ever that we have the opportunity to dialogue with you, especially as we continue to confront this difficult period, starting with COVID. As an agency and as individuals, we have seen a lot over the last few years, and certainly this year as well. It's been another record year, a record year of wildfires, another record year with the pandemic, and certainly we have experienced a lot of challenges in trying to do our field work. But I'm happy to say we have progressed, and that is because of all of you, each one of you. And we wanted to say thank you at this moment as we, despite those challenges, have managed to do our jobs well and to serve the American people well. Our values, our code and commitment, the empathy and compassion we've shared with each other and toward each other, that is what is getting us through. We would never have been able to get through this last year without the ability to lean on one another, from fire response to operational work, to field work, and certainly in our service. Our strength comes from working together, treating each other with compassion and deep respect. Interdependence, our core value, has been our fuel. And I'm so grateful to every one of you for what you've done to get us here today. But I know what's on your mind, just as it's on my mind. It is the requirement that we're working toward, that every federal employee be vaccinated. And I know you're thinking about, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my experience in the workplace? What does this mean for the future workforce of the Forest Service? I'm right there with you. And I have to admit that I don't have all the answers, but I think we can discover those working together. And I know for some, this requirement is a source of relief, while for others, it's creating a lot of anxiety. And you're in a place where you're going to need to make some difficult choices. Many of you already have. And so even though I will tell you I am fully vaccinated, I still feel a high degree of anxiety because frankly, I care about all of you, each of you. And I'm feeling the same agony that some of you are feeling about this decision. You know, I was just talking to my niece over the weekend as we're planning a family event. And I love my niece dearly, and she's struggling with this decision as well. And I told her, you know, I love you, and you know, I'm encouraging you to take this vaccine, but I want you to understand that I respect your choice. And so I think it's important, as I share that same encouragement for her, is to share why I think this is important for us to do, why I personally am encouraging people to take the vaccination along. I think I would have been able to take it without the requirement. And the main reason is I believe that our duty as public servants is to be available. And to do that, we have to provide a stable workforce to serve our American people and deliver our mission. And personally, I want to do everything I can do to keep you safe, to protect you. I can't stand the thought of losing another individual from our ranks. 3 is 3 too many. And I know there may be some that I don't even know about. And so in my own personal commitment to your safety, I'm taking this opportunity for the vaccination seriously, because as a science-based organization, I do believe in science. And at this moment, the science is telling us that the vaccines are our best tool to curb and finally beat this pandemic. And that's why Chief Moore and I are supporting it. But I do recognize, and I own the fact that I respect you and I respect the difficult choice you're going to have to make for yourself. But I will do that with empathy and continued compassion. I also want to recognize the thousands of Forest Service employees who've already completed their survey and those have made the choice to get it completed by November 9th. Thank you so much for your efforts. And I appreciate all you're doing to support others as they make this choice and give them space. I know that those of you who are listening on the bubble really want to have an opportunity to get your questions answered and to have conversations about the vaccine and what it means. And the Forest Service is committed to doing that. We can't do that in today's session or it would take the whole session, rightfully so. But you deserve space to have your questions answered. You deserve space to tell us how you feel, especially as you struggle with trying to make the right choice. So what we're going to do is set aside 2 lunchtime listening sessions, one for the East Coast, one for the West Coast, over the next couple of weeks. The first one will be on the 8th. It's going to be 3 p.m. Eastern, which is lunchtime on the west side of the house. We're going to invite all employees who want to share their comments, ask their questions, have conversations with us to join us. And then we'll do it again on November 16th to give the people on the East Coast the same opportunity at noon. Invitations are forthcoming. Again, I want to stress, you deserve to have space to have difficult conversations. But I want you to engage in those conversations from the point of our values, anchoring to our values, showing respect for those with differing opinions, showing honor and empathy and compassion for those who choose whatever way they choose to go. So those sessions will be designed that way to get your voice in, but to do it showing up as the Forest Service would want you to show up, displaying our values and our respect for one another. We will reflect who we are in that session. We'll engage in these conversations in a respectful way and serve as active listeners. Please take some time before you join the sessions to take a look at the video that I distributed last 2 weeks ago. In that video, I talked about what difficult conversations are and how we need to have them and how to have them. It's available inside the Forest Service. We're going to include it in the invitations. It'll just give you a basis on how we want you to show up to have this difficult chat. No matter how you decide, I want you to feel respected and valued for your differing opinion. And I hope you'll respect mine as well. Remember, we are in this together and we will support each other and show up with compassion and respect. As for our time today, we're going to spend a little time just sharing the latest developments in news and the deadlines. And one thing I do want to say about the deadlines, I know you're wondering, why would you have a listening session when the deadline is approaching as rapidly as it is? Great question. Well, we feel like there are those of you who really want to share what's on your mind, no matter what the deadlines say, and that you want to have that space to have your last questions answered. You deserve that. And I will also say that we've learned from USDA that if you, in the final moments, in the 11th hour, if you decide to get your vaccination, the USDA will honor that and any further action will cease at that point. So I wanted to make sure you know that we do have up to that time to allow you to get the vaccinations, even though I'm encouraging you to get it by the November 9th deadline. So these conversations will happen as the timeline is approaching, but we still think you deserve that space. And remember, if you wait until the 11th hour and you make that move, we will honor it. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Deb Pressman, who's leading the agency's effort around the vaccination. She's going to share the latest developments and questions and responses to your questions as you ask them in the chat. So I thank Debbie and her team for being here today. I thank you for listening to me, and I look forward to further engaging with you on November 8th and November 16th. You deserve to be heard, you deserve to be respected, And we care about each and every one of you and want to keep you safe and keep ourselves safe to serve the American people. Thanks for listening. Over to you, Deb Pressman.
Thanks so much, Associate Chief Coleman. We've been in this pandemic for nearly 2 years, and reducing its spread is a top priority, both nationally and around the world. On October 20th, the CDC reported that US COVID-19 fatalities had reached 733,834 since the pandemic began. And even today, we're still seeing more than 1,500 COVID-related deaths daily in the United States. Fortunately, the vaccines have proven to be highly effective in preventing hospitalization and death from COVID-19. With that in mind, I want to recognize the thousands of Forest Service employees and contractors who are actively taking steps to reduce the spread of COVID. 60% of you have completed the online proof of vaccination survey, which all federal employees are required to complete by November 9th. Thank you for doing your part to keep your colleagues, your families, and your communities safe. To ensure all employees are reached, the agency has stood up a vaccination status coordination team to manage the various work streams associated with reviewing proof of vaccination, communicating with employees who are not yet fully vaccinated, reviewing requests for reasonable and religious accommodation, enforcing the vaccine requirement, and meeting departmental reporting requirements. Employees have until November 9th to complete the online proof of vaccination survey. But I want to clarify that all employees, even those requesting religious or reasonable accommodation, do need to complete the online survey. If you plan to request reasonable accommodation, there's a place on the form that you can check to indicate your intent. For employees who have already submitted requests for religious or reasonable accommodation, but have not yet completed the online survey, again, please do so by the original November 9th deadline. I'd like to address some concerns I've heard about the timeline for requesting accommodations. The October 18th target date was created to help assess the volume of employees seeking a legal exception. But employees can still submit requests for accommodation. These requests will be reviewed by a management cadre selected for the purpose of reviewing vaccination-related requests and issuing decisions. Vaccine-related accommodation requests must go through the HR reasonable accommodations process, and the authority to issue decisions is limited to this management cadre. Finally, I've heard a number of questions along the lines of what happens if I don't get vaccinated or fill out the online survey? Employees that are not vaccinated and do not have a pending reasonable accommodation requests can face discipline up to removal. We are following the progressive disciplinary approach recommended by the Office of Personnel Management, and additional details are available on the Safer Federal Workforce website. That link is also available inside the Forest Service. But the short answer is that employees would be subject to a series of progressive actions, including counseling, suspension, and potential removal. So please use the online survey form to provide proof of vaccination or request reasonable accommodation. I know that many of you still have further questions, and I'll close by restating Associate Chief Coleman's invitation to our 2 upcoming listening sessions. I also encourage you to monitor the agency's pandemic and reentry resources page, which is updated regularly and includes a link to the FAQs on USDA's response to COVID-19 workplace safety and to keep an eye on inside the Forest Service. Thank you all for your continued efforts to create the safest possible workplace.
Thank you, Debbie. I appreciate all the hard work you are leading with the team and in concert there with Emily Blount and the pandemic coordinators. I know people will appreciate the upcoming opportunities to talk more about this vaccine requirement as we move through the process. And just to clarify today, we do see questions coming through about the requirement. We will be gathering those up for Debbie and Emily to use during those listening sessions. So with that, I am going to transition our focus now to the portion of the call with Chief Moore. So Chief Moore, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Katie, and Associate Chief Coleman and Debbie. Thank you all too for sharing that information. And I just want to say hello to everyone. And you know, I know that everybody's got a really busy schedule. I know to take time out to engage in a conversation with us, it takes you away from some of the other work that you're doing. So just know that I recognize that. And I want to just say thank you for joining us today. You know, on the topic around COVID, I would just say that I know that this is a tough subject. And let me say, for those of you who've been vaccinated and those of you who's planning to be vaccinated, thank you for that. I also know that we're not 100% in agreement of where we should go. And, you know, I compare this family to my own family, where my own family, we're not all in agreement where we should be too. So I understand it. I think this is a part of society. It's a part of us, who we are. But just know that we're putting these things in place, and it's really because we don't want to lose anyone. And we've done that, as Angela said, 3 times, which is 3 times too many. But in order to do that, we know that we need to have some dialogue around this. And so that's one of the reasons that Associate Chief Coleman is creating these listening sessions, so that folks feel like they can at least have a voice in this and state their opinions, but we still move forward with this. So having said that, let me just shift a little bit and kind of focus on the future. I've been in this job, I think today will be 3 months. And so I've had a chance to reflect on more of a vision, or more of where I think we need to go. And it has to do with things that are occurring across the agency, and the fact that while, you know, it's a lot of big problems that we are trying to deal with, it's also created an opportunity to have a dialogue. It also created an opportunity to have legislation that I think can make a big difference, and where we have been wanting to go for a long time. So, you know, if I've reflected on this job in the last 3 months, and as I've looked at the last 20 years that we've been going through as an agency, I've seen a few things. One, we've seen growing fire and growing fire sizes. We've seen some really extreme behavior in the fires, and we've seen seasons that have grown into years. So in the past 20 years, I've also looked at what's happened across the Western states. And, you know, there, of course, we've had record wildfires, but even outside of the West, we have states like Georgia, Oklahoma, Texas, who have also had record years. And so even though the focus seems to be on the West, we also know that it's not limited to the West. We're going through the same problems down south and Southwest. So, you know, and I'm preaching to the choir here. I don't have to tell you this, but, you know, the accumulated fuels, warming climate, expanding development in the wildland-urban interface, those things are creating to the conditions that we find ourselves in today. But, you know, it's not just wildfires. Last year, we had record hurricane season and disastrous windstorms, you know, across many of our southern and Midwestern states. And these disasters affected some of you. They affected some of your families, some friends that you have, and you know, also the communities that we live in. And so we are a big part of these communities that we're seeing being negatively affected by a lot of these national events. And then when you couple not only those things that have been happening, but looking at trying to tackle COVID nationwide, and at the same time looking at record visitations to a lot of our sites across the national forest, that is a significant burden that we've had to deal with as an agency. And, you know, what I am so proud of is you, our employees from across the nation, where we have stepped up no matter what the incident was, whether it was bad weather, whether it was bad fires, you name it. If there was the pandemic, we have really stepped up to the plate, and we have really performed as an agency, and we performed as an agency that has this act together. And so I just want you to know that I owe you a lot of gratitude. And I think this nation owes you a huge debt of gratitude as well. And I think they're trying to demonstrate that, particularly with some of the legislation that we're seeing, and also some of the opportunities that we're seeing. You know, I hear them saying, the Forest Service, we hear you. We are working hard to kind of give you the tools to do what you need to do out there. So you know, and I just came from a region as well where we've been mired down into some of these types of things. And we've had 2 solid years of nothing but pressure and demands. And to me, it's really crystal clear that as an agency, we're tired. And, this affects all of us. And really, when you look at it over the last decade, we've seen wildfire crisis build, reaching new heights. We've seen it reach into every corner of our agency. And what we've also seen is that it's been absorbing and sucking the resources into fire and away from some of these resource programs. And that's not a negative knock on fire, because that's an emergency. We have to do what we did. But Congress passed legislation, to deal with the fire funding fix. And what that did is stop the bleeding of the 10-year average, how it was sucking other funds from other program areas into the suppression effort. And so now, while we continue with the necessary resources for a suppression effort, I think we also have the opportunity now to look at building that resource side of the house. Here's the thing, we know what to do. We have success stories all across the country where field treatment stopped wildfires from burning homes, watersheds, other values at risk, towns. I call this, and it's the same thing I shared with some of our congressional meetings, we know what to do, but the problem is that it's random. We have random acts of greatness all across the agency. And what we have to do is turn those random acts of greatness into a watershed scale or a fireshed scale to match the scale of the fires that we see taking place across the country. So, we have the means to end this crisis over the next 10 years, but only if we shift our thinking about what it'll take. Only we stand united, only us. So with a common message about the need to ramp up our treatments to the scale of the actual wildfire work. So now, in order to ground us in the realities on the ground while we look into the future, I'd like to invite some of our colleagues to join me on camera and share a little bit about their experiences. Just recently, I invited the executive leadership team to come out to California, and we owe a trip now to Oregon and Region 6 as well, to see some of the impacts of fires and really the situation that our employees are working in and working through, and really the challenges that many of you are facing. So these truths are important for us to talk about and acknowledge. If we're to stand together as an agency, I do believe that we can hold both things, the challenges that we have and the hope and the motivation for the future. So let's get into this conversation. Katie, I'll hand it over to you to kind of facilitate this next session. And for those of you that know me, I don't like talking at employees. I like talking with employees, and that's about having a conversation because I think that that's where we discover a lot of things that we don't discover, with me just being a talking piece, talking at you. So Katie, I'm looking forward to this, and hopefully looking at whatever's in the chat pod, plus this conversation, we'll get a good understanding of what's on people's minds, and I look forward to that. So Katie?
Absolutely. Thanks, Chief. We do have a lot of great questions coming in. However, first we're going to start with Jeff Marcellet. Jeff, welcome. He's the forest supervisor on the El Dorado National Forest in California. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. And thanks, Chief. A lot of what you just said really resonated with a lot of the issues we're facing out here in the West. So as you know, the forest supervisor for the El Dorado National Forest. And I'd like to just start by saying thanks to you and the executive leadership team for coming out and looking at the impact that the Caldor fire had on our communities and on our forest and really on our people. So my question to you, and my question almost falls in line with what you just shared there, Chief, but on the Caldor fire, and you saw this and the executive leadership team saw this, the places where we had treatments were the places where we had an opportunity to engage the fire, where we were able to steer the fire, and where we were ultimately able to stop the fire. And 220,000 acres, that's a lot of ground to cover, but I think the Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit and the El Dorado, though we had a lot of treatments on the ground, we all wish we would have had more. But as you know, and I think you pointed out in your opening, over the decades, our funding has moved so much more towards suppression. I think in my career alone, I started, it was about 19% of our agency's budget. Now it's well over 50%. And that's been a direct impact to resource specialists and our capability to do the treatments. So here's my question. with the fires only getting larger, only getting more complex, only getting more costly, what's some of the top line thinking from the agency on how we can rebuild resource staffing, maybe rebalance the investment, and ultimately work more on the resilient forest side, creating those treatments on the ground so we don't have the big destructive fires, where maybe we can manage fires more naturally.
Hey, Jeff, thanks. And it's really a really great question. And I would say that in cases where we've been fortunate enough to have treatments, those are the treatments that are really speaking loudly during this fire season that we're going through here, this fire year that we're going through now, because we've used even the Dixie Fire to some extent, and you name it, the Caldor Fire, and looking at many other fires across the West where we have had treatments, we see how that fire behaves differently. And one of the misnomers out there is that folks think these treatment is going to stop a fire. It's not, but it's certainly going to change the behavior of that fire as it continues to move aggressively. And that's what we want, to give our firefighters a chance to really kind of knock it down. Some of the conversation I've been having with some of the congressional members has to do with this very question. What does the Forest Service need? And can you be strategic? Can you be different? And what I try to explain is that we don't have to be different. We have to be more of what we currently are, but we can't do that without additional resources, because our workforce is tired from dealing with all of these other emergencies, which I mentioned earlier, that just pops up throughout the year, every year. And so I've, me moving into this job, one of the things that was important for me is that I wanted to do a couple of things. One, I wanted to provide some stability in the agency. And one of the things that I needed to do that is that I need to look at all of the positions where we have detailers in and get them filled with permanent positions. I also wanted to work with HR to look at greatly accelerating the time it takes to hire positions. And I think that that's to me that if we have stability within the agency, then we're in a better frame of mind to deal with all of this stuff that we have to deal with, but also take advantage of the opportunities I think we're going to have in the infrastructure bill. And we'll see what happens with the reconciliation bill. If that goes through as well, that's a lot more additional monies. And so if we are to get those dollars, which I feel really good about the infrastructure dollars, less good about the reconciliation, but that still could happen to some degree. The question is, Forest Service, you've been asking for this money for a long time. What are you going to do? And so to answer that particular part of the question, I got my executive team, and that's when we all visited California. We looked at the Dixie Fire and the Caldor Fire. We looked at the town of Greenville, how it just burned to the ground, much like Paradise, much like many other places across the country, where these fires are taking out communities. They're taking out our own employees, their homes. It's really having a devastating effect on us. Now, here's the thing for us as Forest Service. I hear you, we're tired. I hear you, we don't have enough resources. I hear that. But here's what Congress is hearing. We need more money. We need more resources to do what we know what to do. Now they're going to give us the money. What we cannot say is that we can't do it now, because we've been saying for years we could do it if we had more resources. So the question for us, I think, is how will we organize ourselves to be successful? Will we and are we willing to change what we know to be right in order to allow other things that could be right and could be good to take place? And here's what I mean by that. If we've been saying that it takes too long to hire positions, are you willing to give up your control over who you hire as long as you get a good position? See, that's what I'm talking about. There's the compromises that we have to make as an agency. And are we willing to do that? And so we don't have to answer that, but I think we really have to question ourselves. Is it all about me and what I want and what I'm used to, or is it about the greater good in terms of moving us forward as an agency? Because I'll tell you, one of the conversations the secretary had with me, I may be giving you more than what you're asking for, Jeff, but this is such a loaded question.
This is great.
So much is riding on this. One of the things the secretary asked me, he said, Randy, he says, I feel good that we're going to get money for the Forest Service to do the things that it needs to do. He said, but what I need to ask you will you be smart about this money, and will you be strategic about how you build your cadre and how you approach fixing this issue, so that this is not just a 5-year thing or 10-year thing, but it takes on a life where we can perpetuate it. And so we can leverage it to continue on as a way of doing work. And so, you know, I share that with you all because, you know, this is more of a transactional kind of thing.
Yeah.
They're going to do this for us. Now, what are you going to do for them? And what we're going to do for them is organize ourselves differently. We're going to be flexible in what we want. We're going to be more diverse in our thinking. We're going to be smart and strategic about how we go about getting this work done. And so while you're asking me this question, Jeff, I'm also putting it back on you and others. What are you willing to do to be successful with many of these resources that I feel good that we're going to be getting?
Yeah, Chief, great. And I know my folks back at home love to hear kind of what you just shared there. And I can say we're all about great, it's good. I think we are ready to adapt and change. We have folks with great ideas. I know there's great ideas all over the system. So I really appreciate the opportunity. And I think it's going to be a time for us to shine. So appreciate that.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you both. I'm getting motivated just listening to your back and forth. So thank you. Up next, we have Chris Carlton. Chris is the Forest Supervisor on the Plumas National Forest. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chief, and everyone. Thanks for making a little bit of time. This topic really hits home for our Plumas team. As you know, here on the Plumas, approximately 2/3 of our forest has burned since 2017, and a lot of that has been in the last couple seasons. We've had a lot of communities impacted and some devastated. We have employees who've been evacuated, lost homes and work centers, and had their life's work out on the landscape impacted. So when we talk about fatigue, you are absolutely right, Chief. We are indeed fatigued. This season really has shown how important that care and recovery part of what we do really is. Really appreciate yours and the ELT's commitment to engaging here directly from our team. That means a lot to help us move forward. So I guess kind of turning to a question for you. As we see these larger, longer duration fires that are impacting the landscape, we're recognizing our suppression response is a lot greater than our post-fire response. We're able to mobilize thousands of firefighters to fight the fire, and it's really hard to find even a portion of that on the back end to address the immediate aftermath. Suppression repair, bare, hazard tree removal, all of that takes a lot of the same resources. And they're not, you know, this late in the season, they're just not available. And so what I'm wondering is, how do we add to that capacity for our late season post-fire response? And how do we organize a little differently to make sure that we're treating the fire from beginning all the way as far into the end and as possible?
Yeah, so thanks for that, Chris. And let me say this before I give you a response to the question. You know, what I would like us to do as an agency is not to look up for answers. You know, don't look for the WO to give you answers, because throughout my whole career, coming up, particularly working at that ground level, I've always felt that I knew more about what that ground needs than anybody else in the regional office, and certainly anyone else in the Washington office. I would imagine that you still have that perception out there, and I happen to agree with that in so many ways. You know, a lot of us in the WO have ground experience, but you all know that most of the creativity in this agency has come from the ground. And so while you're asking, what do we think? I'll tell you what I think, and we'll tell you what we think, but I also want you all to know that you have the license to do what you think you need to do for that piece of ground where you are. And I would say that if we could change our mindset to not say, what can we do, and turn it around to say, here's what I think we need to do. That puts us in a position to support you and not to oversee you, if that makes sense. So now I would just say that because I want the creativity and I want the answers to come from the ground. And I want us to be in service to the ground. But in order to do that, the ground has to be creative. The ground has to lead and has to take its ownership and leadership in having some of these solutions to some of the challenges that they're doing. And I know we need to give you resources to do that. and we're about to do that. But I need you to be thinking differently. I need you to think as though you are in charge, because you are. So what does the ground need? So let me tell you what my perspective is, at least from where I'm at. You know, I think we need to do a lot of things. I think we need to do a lot more thinning. I think that we need to do that so that we can return these low intensity fires to these landscapes, both prescribed fire and also even the natural fires. And I think that the natural ignition fires, we need to have some discussions around. So I'm asking our science team to take the lead, to start having these discussions out there. Because if we talk about the natural fires, if we talk about fires of resource benefit, in some parts of the country, that's falling on deaf ears, because right now we have communities burning. And even though we're right with that kind of science, we need to have some dialogue around that so people really understand what we're saying and in what conditions should we allow those things to happen. I think the noise is too high right now to have those conversations. So we want our scientists to lead out on that. We want to rest on their shoulders for this. In order to do that, they're going to have to get out into the communities, whether we have webinars or whatever it might be, to start that dialogue and that debate out there. I think we have a lot of examples of what a good natural prescription would be. I look at the West and the East. I think they have done an outstanding job of having a prescribed fire program, and what a prescribed fire program looks like, but also what a maintenance program to maintain those ecosystems, what it looks like. So we have examples of what we, aspire to be. And I think it's much like what we have down south, where we have I would say great examples. So that's, I know that the West is different than the South and the East and Midwest. And, I know we're all different, but we could take that and scale it, to the I guess the magnification that applies out West. So there's some things we can do. It's a guide. And as always, we're going to use best available science as our guide. So the things that work in the East, in the West, in the South, we'll take whatever is best and whatever is prescribed for that. I think that, one of the things, particularly when we talk about the best available science, it's telling us about the scale of the actual fires that we face. And it's also saying that we need to place our treatments in the right places and really at the right scale. So where we have small scale treatments and large scale fires, those fires run right through those small scale treatments. So the scale of our treatments has to match the scale of those fires. And so doing that, we focus on fire sheds. Whether you talk about fire sheds, watersheds, or forested landscape, you can put different names on that. These areas can have, the ignition could take place there and expose communities and other values to wildfires at risk. So we want to target the highest fire sheds first in terms of priority. And then we'll use the fire shed registry. I hope folks are really familiar with the fire shed registry. And we'll take a look at scenario planning or scenario investment planning to size and place treatments in a way that will truly make a difference, which I was saying earlier on the scale. So here's an example. If we're strategic about that, we've said that we have about 66 million acres that needs to be treated. Our science is telling us that if we do this right and if we do this strategically, we could treat 20 million acres strategically to have a positive impact on 66 million acres. And so what that looks like, we need to have more discussions on that. But we are gearing up to work with our partners across these shared landscapes. And we're going to be looking at putting fuels treatment and forest health treatments more strategically at the same scale of the problem that I talked about earlier. We also know that, we've said we have 20 million acres that we want to treat, but there's another somewhere between 10 and 30 million acres of other federal, state, and tribal and private lands that are also in the West that we need to look at treating as well. And I think we stand a really good chance looking at our shared stewardship agreements that we have. I think we have them in about 46 or so states right now. So we have enough to really take off managing fire sheds or large landscapes where we really make a difference on what's happening across the landscapes. So I'll just say this last thing and then I'll turn it over. But I've created a small team. Brian Farabee is going to be the senior executive to lead us in preparing for this work. And Brian has already established a wildfire reduction infrastructure team. And I think we already have a collaborative framework in place for a lot of the cross-boundary treatments that I'm talking about, including that cohesive strategy and having some of those cohesive strategy projects. So we plan to build on that capacity to place the right treatments at the right places and at the right scale to protect a lot of these communities that we're seeing becoming higher at risk. So those are my thoughts. And yet, having said that, Chris, I still want solutions to come from the field so that we can be in service to what you think needs to take place out there. So I stand on my opening statements, but also gave you my opinion of where we're going as an agency and where I think we need to go.
Thanks, Chief. And having worked with you and for you for a couple of years, the what do you think the solution needs to be? You know, and we are. I think the field's coming up with some really good solutions. You know, we're seeing some positive steps. We're starting to pool our resources regionally around some of the suppression and suppression, repair, and bear needs. We're standing up some daily calls. We're looking at regional NEPA for some of those hazard tree issues. So I think we're doing that. You know, we continue to see challenges right around capacity, caterers, showers, all that stuff. We got to care and feed people doing the work. You know, and I look forward to continuing that, you know, kind of that revisioning of what it means to really fight a fire. So yeah, thanks for that, Chief. Really appreciate it.
You bet. And, you know, what I didn't mention, you know, in the infrastructure bill, we stand to gain about $5.6 billion in there. So you talk about you need resources. I think we're trying to look at that. And while we're talking about fire and treatments on the landscape, I want folks to know too that there's money in there for recreation. There's money in there for other things as well. And so I think that we'll have a lot more resources to look comprehensively at what needs to take place on that ground. So this is not just about veg treatments to stop wildfires. It's really about the infrastructure, and it's really about recreation and all of those things that we do as an agency.
Oh, great. Thank you both. Next up, we have Jason Emhoff. Jason is the District Fire Management Officer on the Natchez Ranger District on the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest in Region 6. Jason, welcome.
And thanks, Katie, and thank you, Chief, for the opportunity. My question revolves around the ongoing trend of the agency quickly losing firefighters over the last number of years to other jobs. So getting right to it, my question is, there's been ongoing discussion concerning pay and benefit disparity, retention and recruitment issues, and lack of resources needed to allow for proper fatigue management. What are you and the agency doing to turn this from discussion to reality in a timely manner?
Yeah, it's really a great question. You know, we've had a lot of discussions around these issues. In fact, you know, as I moved into this job back at the end of July, really into August, you know, that's where we spent most of our time, is trying to deal with this issue, but also trying to educate in many ways, you know, the government on this end of the spectrum about the need for this and why, you know, even though the president talked about $15 as a minimum wage, it never really was about minimum wage. You know, it was about having a competitive wage. It's about having a competitive salary. You know, it's really about, you know, a lot of our firefighters sleeping in cars sometime because they can't afford, or there's no room in the communities that they're serving. So it was about a lot of stuff. You know, it's about us paying our partners quarter to quarter, but we don't pay ourselves quarter to quarter. You know, it's about all of those things that created this inequity, if you will, across the spectrum, where it almost feels like, these are my words now, that we were better to our neighbors than what we were better to ourselves. And so I think that that is the wrong approach to take. And I've really committed myself to really trying to even the playing field a bit more in terms of what a lot of our employees, in particular our firefighters, are having to go through. You know, the firefighters that are left, you know, I mean, this is a way of life for a lot of our firefighters. I mean, you love being a Forest Service, a wildland firefighter, you know, but they also have families they have to take care of. They also have to worry about themselves. And so as an agency, we have to do better in terms of providing those same benefits if we're going to be competitive with these other agencies. And I know that, you know, every place is not the same. There's going to be some places that are more expensive than others to live. And there can be some places where we're doing good as employees compared to the local community, the local areas. But we also have a growing number of communities where a Forest Service firefighter at the lower end of the scales can go and work at a fast food restaurant and make the same, if not slightly more, without all the extra overtime. And I think in a lot of cases, you know, we have firefighters chasing overtime hours just so they can make ends meet. And I also know that at some point, fatigue is going to set in with that kind of a work-life balance. And we're seeing that, particularly as we move from a fire season to a fire year. You know, we're not robots, we're not machines. And at some point, fatigue is going to set in. So some of the things that, you know, Jaylith Rivera, who is the Deputy Chief of State and Private that oversee that, she has been working, I mean, just overtime, literally, to educate, you know, some of those agencies that has a say in what we do. You know, it's like OMB, it's like across the streets there. You know, this issue got daylight because we were briefing the White House on a weekly basis during the siege of the fires. And so we had their attention. And we took advantage of having that attention to really put in writing the state or the condition of the situation. So I'm here again, you know, people that are in charge of the money, you know, they're there for a reason. And we have to make sense. You know, we have to talk about value. We have to talk about why we need to do certain things. But I think that we have made more progress this year than we have made at any time in the past. And so I'm going to hold out hope, Jason, you know, in terms of what we're able to do. And looking at that infrastructure package, we're going to be able to fix a lot of these issues that we're talking about now. That's going to make life much better for a Forest Service wildland firefighter. You know, there are things that are taking place through legislation, you know, and there's things like looking at the whole thing around wildfire series. It's about, you know, the competitive wage and the competitive salary. So those things are being talked about now more than they ever have been. And I'm so thankful for, you know, the work that Jaylith and Mark Lichtenstein are putting in to make this happen. I think we have two of the best minds working on this. And I think because of them, I feel really good that we're going to make some progress in this arena.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. I appreciate the responses. Definitely encouraged by the infrastructure bill and then the other new bill also being proposed and the actions taking place. A lot has happened in the last year, more so than long time before. So appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. Thanks, Jason, for joining us. And our last question will, during this section, will be from Kyle Servedio. Kyle is a hand crew foreman with the Pinhoti Veterans Crew working for the Southern Regional Office. Kyle, go ahead.
Thanks, Katie. Hey, Chief, how's it going? My question is correlating to your prescribed fire from the Southeast, possibly bringing it out west. And some of the ideas that I might have for you is possibly bringing resources from our region, possibly onboarding resources out west a little earlier to help mitigate these prescribed fires, and to maybe create a national prescribed fire training center out west, similar to the one in Florida, maybe at Jeff's Forest out in El Dorado or somewhere similar, and also utilizing our militia a little more for fire. And bringing those resources as well out west.
Yeah. So, hey, Cal, thank you. You know, the question I would have for you and others here is, what should that look like? You know, and the thing that kind of intrigues me a lot is, you know, we have a great system for wildfire suppression. You know, where we put in the needs and we have firefighters coming to wherever the needs are, but we don't do that for prescribed burning. And so what would it take to have a system that's equivalent to our wildfire system you know, to this prescribed burning, because we have said, and we'll continue to say that a lot of these ecosystems that we manage, they're a fire adaptive ecosystem. And so no matter what treatment we put on the landscape, no matter what veg treatment we put on there, we still need to run fires through there to maintain that work. And so if we're going to do that, and if we're really serious about that, what kind of a system do we need in the organization that will allow us to dispatch for resources, take advantage of the windows that we have, you know, all across the US? You know, let's take advantage of the windows we have by pulling resources and putting them there to do that. And I would ask you all, you know, what would that look like? What needs to happen for us to create a system, build a system, modify our existing system to add prescribed burning to that wildfire suppression activity? What does it take for that? And how would it look? And I know that Kyle, I know you personally, but I also know a lot of your colleagues would have some great ideals of things that we can consider in terms of an organization. So I would like to just, you know, just call on you all to share with us some of these ideals that you think would work, because we do want to move there, but we want you to be included in what we develop and how we develop it. So I want to activate you, if that's the right word, and your colleagues to help us think through this.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hey, thank you to the folks that have joined us here to engage in some conversation with Chief Moore. And what we'll be able to do now is take some questions that have been coming in during the session. So there have been hundreds of questions. They're really great. We will not be able to answer them all, but we will use them to inform, you know, what folks are thinking about, what you want to know more about. And what I'm going to do right now is just select a few of these, and we'll do as many as we can. So let me see here. Here's a good one. Our question is, I think you would agree that our nation has become rather polarized on just about everything, but I feel national forests and grasslands are still loved, and the U.S. Forest Service is still quite credible. So do you have any insights or goals to further our credibility as an agency of the people?
You know, and I'm going to ask Associate Chief Coleman to jump in on this as well. You know, we tease each other, but, you know, she has more of a Washington office flavor to her than me since I'm new here. So I'm going to give you a flavor that's not quite been, you know, WO oriented just yet. But I, you know, I don't know that I have an answer to that, because every time I talk to someone, they always talk about the great work that the local Forest Service folks are doing. And when they talk negatively about the Forest Service folks, it's because they want something else. And so I would say in general, we have a good reputation because the folks at that ground level has done an outstanding job of working with your local leaders, your local politicians, the local folks, and they're doing everything they can with what they have. They just don't have enough to do a better job or to do more of that work that they're currently doing. So from my experiences, I think that that local level, that forest and district level, I think that, you know, it's not 100%, but I think by and large, the county supervisors and county commissioners and others they think the Forest Service is doing a good job. They recognize that we don't have enough people to do more of that kind of work. But I think we already suffer. I mean, we already have a really a great reputation. What they don't like is, you know, us here in the WO maybe that's kind of leading this effort, and somehow they don't find money to ship out to the forest. And, you know, this is going to be different, I believe, this year. I think we're going to be in a whole different situation. I believe we're going to have a lot of resources now. And really the question is for us, will we be smart and will we be strategic? Same thing the Secretary asked me, I'm asking you all, can we do this? And the answer is yes. What will it take for you to put the agency first in terms of how we do this and how we lead out and how we really establish ourselves all over again?
Thanks, Chief Moore. I'm going to jump in real quick and just say one of the things I have always loved about the Forest Service is, and it makes me always want to bet on us, because we do have the ability to transcend noise and get above the political noise to really focus on what is right and what is in the interest of the country, no matter where the country finds itself. And we do that by bringing people together to work it through collaboratively. I learned my skills around collaborative work, around public participation from the Forest Service, from working at a forest level. And we had a reputation for doing a good job of listening for options, listening for opportunities rather than listening for ways to shut people down. That's been our model. And it's translated itself many, many times. It's gotten better. But the Forest Service is known as a convening and facilitating toward resolution organization, simply because this is the way we knew we had to work from the days of Pinchot up until now. And I always bet on us when our backs are against the wall and we're looking for options. The Forest Service knows how to bring people together. That's our thing. That's part of our DNA. And so I think that reputation has served us very well. And I think we can be an example to a country that's struggling to figure out how to do that well by continuing to build those kinds of skills.
Thank you, Angela. So the next question here, Chief, is looking for a little bit of an update on our telework policy and return to work. So I know Tony Dixon is here with us, but let me read the question first. Will USDA be reviewing its telework policy? Will reasonable accommodation be an option for employees who wish to continue teleworking?
Yes, take it away, Tony.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Chief. Absolutely. Telework is still going to be a core component to the way we work. We're still considering remote work, how we work in the future, but telework, as it stands right now, our secretary has really laid out a broad approach to teleworking, which gives us up to 4 days of telework as it stands now. I think it's worth noting that throughout this pandemic, our employees have really showed a great deal of dedication and commitment to how we work and really remap how they were doing their work. And I think that's going to forever change the way that we operate as an agency. So this is a new tool in our toolbox as an agency, and we're going to take full advantage of using that so that we can continue to advance our work in the agency.
You know, Tony is right. So, okay, let me also add too, so the Forest Service has spoken, and what it has told everybody is that no matter what the challenges are, we usually find a way to make it work. And I go back to when we first started this pandemic. I thought 2 weeks, 3 at the most, that we'll be back at work. And I know that the agency started making some adjustments in itself, but what I'm so proud of, and what I think it's demonstrated, particularly to the Department of Agriculture, since we're the largest agency within it, is that, look, if the Forest Service can do this, anyone can do this. Particularly how we have resource professionals all across the country at every level of the organization. And so what has happened is that we've made this work for 1.5 years, almost 2 years now. And so what we have got to be careful about is that we cannot say that we can't operate like this, because we've already been doing it for 2 years. And you know what's ironic is that we have achieved or exceeded our goals as an agency in this manner. Now, like always, when you're up at this level of the organization, we don't see the price or the cost for this success. So I know that we're paying for this in some ways, particularly down at the lower level. But we have to be mindful too of what we are saying if we say that we can't continue to operate in this manner. because look for, sir, you've done this for 2 years now, and you have been wildly successful at doing it. And we know that you pay the cost for that in some ways. So let's talk about those things that got little love versus those things that got a lot of love. And let's talk about how we can shore those things up to be in a much better shape. Recreation as an example. Our employees never stopped attending to those rec sites. And so our recreation employees have really been on the ground on a daily basis, interfacing with our publics. And you all know that some of them are just downright mad at times, and so I just want to recognize that, we're talking a lot about fire, and we talk a lot about vegetation treatment and stuff, but we also have another part of the organization that has just been doing an outstanding job. And we don't talk about it because we've gotten so used to it that we just don't seem to recognize it the same. And then I think this is what we're trying to do now, is to recognize that whole recreation part of our organization has been doing an outstanding job of dealing with record level visitation to our sites this year. I mean, record level. And we're doing that with detailers, and we're doing that with actives, and we're doing that with a short staff. And so while we're talking about beefing up this fire part and the vegetation part, we also need to be talking about the recreation part as well. But now let me just say to the recreation people, now as you get more money to do the work that you've been doing, don't say that you can't do it because you don't have enough resources. We know that. So we need to hire more resources to do more work, right? So we got to be careful to say we just can't seem to do it, because we're going to have to be strategic and creative. And if I take the GAOA monies as an example, where we're having a hard time getting stuff done, it's because we're trying to do it ourselves the way that we've always done it. And what we ask you to do is to be successful with this pile of money coming at us. We got to establish partnerships with our counties, with the state, to look at them helping us do some of this work that we need to do. So anyway, I'll stop there because I know there's more questions, but I just wanted to recognize the great work that our recreation staff has been doing all across the country, and to let them know that there's resources coming that way as well.
Great, thanks, Chief. And we have some recreation specific questions I hope we'll get to in a bit as well. So this next question here is going back to workforce and challenges that we face. So are there plans to make the 2021 change to 3 days of rest following a 14-day fire assignment permanent? And are there plans to eliminate 2-hour callbacks or compensate crews who do this? Working 13 days straight and having 1 day off on call is exhausting.
Yes,
Jalith is here too. Yeah.
Well, gosh, I'd prefer to let the chief answer, but yes, absolutely, we're going to be keeping that policy in place. We've heard, unequivocally from people that it was critical this year. So we're going to be keeping that in place. And I appreciate the question around the callbacks and only getting 1 day off. And, as far as I'm concerned, we just want to try to eliminate that if all possible. We want to build in the needed rest and resilience time that we can. And we know even 3 days sometimes isn't enough, but, our goal is to have that maximum rest time built in and help our employees build up some of that resilience before going back out on assignment. So I really appreciate that question.
Thanks, Jalith. Chief, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's it. I mean, the short answer is yes, we want to continue that. We recognize the fatigue in the system. And we've also learned that, with the type of conditions we're having and the type of years that we're having, that 3rd day is necessary.
Thank you. All right, here's the next question. We're staying in the topic of fire. Part of the treatments that helped stop the Caldor fire were prescribed fire. This year, we stopped prescribed burning due to high risk. How do we reconcile these tensions when current decisions may be leading to future large fires?
So Jalith, I don't know if you or Mark want to respond, but so my view on that is that, I think we have to be smart about the decisions that we make. And I think when you have conditions on the landscape like what we had this year, particularly if you're talking about California and the Caldor fire, I mean, I think it's kind of foolish, to be honest with you, to have more fire in the system where we didn't have enough firefighters to deal with the fires that were taking place. You know, if I look all across the country, you know, we dealt just short of 46,000 fires. And when I look at the number of significant fires, we had over 115 large fires that we were trying to manage at one time. That doesn't even mean looking at the drawdown issue and keeping firefighters at home to stop fires on initial attack. We were overwhelmed, and there were some fires that we could not get to simply because we didn't have the resources to get there. And so to put other fire on the ground in those conditions, it's just kind of foolhardy if you're asking me. And so, you know, people will always question our decision, but we have to look at what are the implications of a decision like that, particularly if a fire gets away during a prescribed burn. That escape fire could turn into burning down a community. And we don't want that liability, nor do we want that kind of responsibility, because I don't think that those are good decisions. And so if we make the right decision, I'm okay with dealing with the backlash because of that decision. But based on our values as an agency and looking at safety as a core value, we're not going to sacrifice our lives nor our communities in order to just put more fire on the landscape. Jalith, I don't know if you'd want to add anything to that.
Well, you know, I'd just add, Chief, that we did, you know, build in the ability for folks to make those decisions and bring them up to the Washington office and to you if the conditions were right in their place, right? Because we know conditions are different. And I know you say a lot, one size doesn't fit all. So we really tried to build in, you know, that need where we had to really focus and triage our resources and not overtax our responders that were out there. And we need those same folks to be on site during a prescribed fire. But in those places, like let's say in the Southwest, right, their fire cycle is a little different. They have prescribed fire windows that are often happening when they have pretty favorable weather. So we did build that in as part of our strategy. And we're just always going to have those kind of trade-offs until we get to a place where our landscapes can receive fire, right? And that's about doing that treatment so we can get them there.
Thanks, Sheila. Chris French, I see you're here, and this next one is for you. Chris French, our Deputy Chief of the National Forest System. So here's the question. We have more trail miles than any other agency, yet we have lower staffing and funding than those other agencies. What are you doing to fix that?
That's awesome. Thank you for the question. And I apologize for being late. We were staffing some things on the Hill, so I just got here. We're doing a lot, and I'll tell you what I'm personally doing. One, we have been working really directly with the administration to increase funding for NFS salary in recreation and in project delivery work and in resources we have for partnering. And that is reflected in the president's budget. It is reflected right now in the markups that we're seeing in the Senate and the House. And that is really good news for us. In addition to that, we're working really closely with members of Congress on the bipartisan infrastructure deal and on the reconciliation bill, where we're building in and advocating for resources to rebuild our recreation capacity across the agency. I've tasked our national team here to be working on essentially a strategy of how we implement those increased resources as they come in. They've been working with the regional leadership, and as we start to see that coming in the next, as the votes come in and we actually get our budget appropriations, we'll be releasing that reinvestment recreation strategy. We know that recreation is the largest driver of GDP off our national forest system. We not only have the largest trail system, I think we have the largest bathroom system across our agencies, across the federal government as well. We have more than 25,000 recreation sites that we take care of and 168 million visitors. This is our focus right now, is to rebuild our recreational capacity and delivery program alongside the work that we're doing to make our forests essentially more resilient and protect communities from wildland fire.
Thank you, Chris. And there are a number of questions in here along the same vein. So I think your answer there covers a lot of those that did come in. Chief, anything you want to add on this?
No, I think Chris is spot on. You know, what he didn't mention maybe is that I've asked Chris to really take the lead on being strategic with recreation. What does recreation going forward needs to look like? And so I'm looking to really be strategic on that, and looking at hearing back from Chris and some of the recreation staff from throughout the agency on, you know, how should we begin to position ourselves going forward.
Great. Okay. So this next question was a topic of discussion just this morning in the executive leadership team. So it's very timely. The agency is down 40% in non-fire personnel. Our partners are tired and we have hiring caps. We have vehicle caps. We have lots of money as an agency, but we have no bench. We have a broken hiring process. Why can't we hire more people? And why is hiring not the #1 priority?
So I'll Tony, you can jump in here, but you know, I think I stated at the beginning of my conversation that hiring is a priority. In fact, you know, I had indicated that for me, the #1 priority is to get some stability within the agency. And in order to do that, we need to have consistent leadership in the agency. And we need to get a lot of these positions where we have detailers in. We need to get permanent positions into those positions. But we also need to look at not just the leadership position, but where we have detailers throughout the organization, we need to get those positions filled. And the thing that I've asked Tony and his staff to do is take a look at a different HR model that would allow us to hire quickly. So Tony, I don't know if you want to just kind of mention a little bit about some discussions that you're having with your staff, and it's kind of where we are right now, but just to emphasize that this is a priority.
So thanks, Chief. We have developed an initial hiring strategy for the agency that can be applied nationwide. We're going to have to implement that. We're going to communicate the details related to that. But as the chief has already indicated, this is the #1 priority for the agency. And we're putting all of our efforts into being able to deliver on quickly hiring position so that we can create that stability that we need in the organization. That's going to be our primary focus. But we're not just going to hire arbitrarily. It's important that we base this on some kind of workforce analysis. And so we have work going on right now to develop that analysis so that we can make strategic choices, because the agency not only needs to focus on hiring those critical jobs that we need to create that stability, but at the same time, we need to create capacity beyond ourselves. And so we're looking at trying to build capacity contracts within this agency so that we can use partnerships to leverage and get work done on the ground. We need to work with tribes, states, other federal entities to leverage the work that we need to get done as well. So it's a comprehensive look that we're trying to facilitate, and we're well on our way to being able to do that. We're not trying to make this decision at the national level alone. It's really critical that we get the insight from our field leaders to understand what are the most critical jobs, where are we having our biggest impacts, and that's where we're going to focus our attention to try to solve those problems first and foremost.
Thanks, Tony. While we have you, I'm going to take on another business question. So what can the agency or USDA do to push for better outcomes in retirement processing from OPM? It seems inherently wrong that we commit ourselves as public servants for 30 years, investing our hearts and souls, working for below market pay, and then be made to wait 8, 9, or 10 months to get retirement packages processed. This is an untenable situation. Tony, anything you can share about that?
I guess I'll start by saying I totally agree, because that's not in alignment with our values. Someone dedicating that much time of their life to this agency, and to have it to end with such a negative outcome is something that we're not happy about. I don't know the specifics of this case for retirement, but all of our processes in the agency it's important that we look at those things so that we can avoid these kind of pitfalls. So I'm sorry that happened, because that's not how we want to do business. It's something that we certainly want to focus some attention on. And so what I would ask Katie is, we have that full question. I'd like to do some follow-up to understand more about exactly what created that problem. I know it has already occurred, but what's more important to me is that it doesn't happen to someone else, because that's not the outcomes that we're trying to achieve in this agency. And so if I can take that question and do some follow-up, I think that would be, it better serve this person as well as the rest of our agency. So I'm more than willing to do that.
Thank you, Tony. Okay. Another question in here, it's a simple question, but a good one, because we've been talking about wanting field solutions, ground up solutions. So the question is, what's the preferred method to communicate potential solutions from the field to the Washington office and the chief? I'll just start off by saying that we do use the Inside the Forest Service tool to send out messages from all of our leadership, including Chief Moore. And there are times where we put a link to a chat pod in there for folks to submit ideas, answers, or questions. So that's always available to us. Chief, I would pass it over to you to see if you have other suggestions or ideas around how innovation can make its way to places where we can make change.
That's one of the things that Angela and Mary Snackers and I was just really talking about lately. And so Angela, I don't know if you would care to maybe share some of your thoughts around this issue.
Steve, I was hoping you'd go first.
I did. Yeah, Kate, I think what you had indicated is really the way to do that. It's easy for me to say, just drop me a message and I'll get back to you at some point. But I'm also trying to learn in this job as well, where if we have a system set up, particularly in the communications staff, where these types of questions are coming in, and you all can take a stab at, just much like we do our comments on planning and whatnot, what's the flavor of the comments, and how should we be responding back out based on what we're getting in. So I don't know. I always want to hear from employees. I always do. And I think if we've got a system set up, Katie, where we can hear from employees, or we have an inbox or some type of a box for people to, just respond to. I don't know if it's a chat pod or whatever it might be, but I'd want to do whatever it takes to make sure that I'm listening to employees, that we're listening to employees, and that we're finding ways to communicate back to them on what we're hearing and what we're proposing to do.
Thanks, Chief. Angela, did you want to add on?
Can I add something in, Angela?
I actually knew that's where he was going to come from. And I wanted him to say that one of the most important goals that I think Chief Moore set for all of us in his office is to provide a service forward experience for interactions with us. And that includes being accessible to all employees one way or another. Obviously, we haven't figured it all out, but the chief has been very clear. And I wanted you all to hear how clear he was, because he has made it he's set the bar high, that we do not want to lose our connections. And we do not want you to lose your voice or feel like we're not listening. And so I know we've got lots of ways to maybe choose to do that, but just know that's in our hearts, that is in our intention. And it started from the very top of our agency on day one. And we're working now to figure out how we play that forward, keep it going, and live up to that standard that he set for us.
Chris, you were going to jump in?
Well, I want to throw in one thing is like, I agree. I mean, all of us deal with the email's really hard, right? To be able to be responsive because of just how many get. But one of the things that I just want to throw out there is I know I try really hard that when we set up meetings on different topics, we like to do these vertical type discussions. It's not just within the hierarchy of how things are set up, but we want to try to get voices from different parts of the agency into those conversations. So if we're talking about how to leverage capacity, let's say for partners towards recreation, I want to set up spaces where I've got district voices, I've got forest voices, I've got partner voices, I got regional voices, or we're going to go out and do field trips and look at those. Here's the thing I need honesty. I need you to tell me what you really think, what you really see. You know, sometimes we get too polite and we're not actually sharing what's actually going on. So like we're trying to create those spaces for dialogues, and I just want to hear it. I may not like what I hear, but it's going to make me better at the way I think about our work. And I encourage you to take those opportunities and talk straight about stuff. That's what I wanted to say.
Talk straight, but be respectful and thoughtful, because the relationship does matter. And I think that's the big get, is that we're all connected, and we deserve to hear from you. You can hear from us, but we do that and protect the relationships too.
Great, thank you. We're coming up towards the top of the hour, and I'm having a hard time choosing which questions to bring in. So we've had a few about hiring in relation to diversity, equity, inclusion. So I'm going to ask one there, and then maybe we'll have time for one more after that. So the question here is, curious about the chief's vision around recruiting diverse candidates to the agency. In my experience, this takes investment of funding, time, energy, and passion. We have had success stories in the past, but it has meant sacrificing in the short term for long-term gains. Are we willing to do this? And what will we change to move the needle?
So, yeah, so the short answer is yes, we're willing to do this. I'm looking over a lot of, kind of this stats and the status of the, how we are as an agency. And I was going over some of Chief Christensen's notes. And one of the things that caught my attention, which I was not aware of, and that is, and I don't know how current this is, because I just grabbed notebooks and started reading, but one of the comments that she had in there is that, over 30% of new employees that are hired resign within 2 years. And, I've been reflecting on that a little bit because a lot of our new employees, many of those are diverse candidates and whatnot. And so it makes me wonder, when we do the outreach and when we do bring in people that are different than, say, what we generally have in these communities, what's our acceptance of things that are new or people that are new? And so how are we as an agency? So I'm not making any allegations, but it makes me wonder what kind of experience are they having? And I've shared with you all before, I grew up in Louisiana, born and raised. And my first job was in a place, North Dakota. And, I still go back to my experiences there. Being in North Dakota, where I did not inquire, and in situations where I did not, I could have walked away thinking and believing in my heart and in my head that they didn't want me there. But what I found out in my particular instance is that it's not that he didn't want me there. He just didn't want me to go through what he thought I was going through, being there and being different and being the only one. That's just one incident. There are many other experiences. And so while I don't know the answer to that, I do know that we have an obligation, we have a responsibility, and there's an expectation on us to have a diverse workforce, and that we need to mimic the societies that we serve. And so we have to do a much better job than that. When I look at, if we're going to be representative of this country, I'm looking and say, well, we are the sum total of our parts. And so it's not like you need to have 10% of this, 10% of that, 10% of these in every location, because you don't have the same opportunity in every location that you have in some locations. But if we are the sum total of our parts, then I think when we work together and we work collectively across the spectrum, I do believe that we can get there. And, you know, I always use this as an example when we were trying to do better in Region 5 as an example. And so that concept for me was like this. You know, I look at something like the Klamath, the Northern California, and we had asked the leaders there to mimic the communities that you serve. That's your goal. We don't have this artificial goal where the country's CLF. What we want you to do is mimic the society that we sit within. And so the example is that the Klamath had about 18% diversity within its boundary. And so their goal became 18%. The Angeles had 66% diversity within their boundaries. So that became their goal. And so at the end of the year, when you look at the Klamath, who had actually 19%, they exceeded their goal. But when you look at the Angeles, who had 40%, which was outstanding, they didn't meet their goal. And it's not that everyone has to do this, but I'm pointing out that if we work together, that I think that we can get there. And we don't, it's not the same everywhere. The same opportunity, it's just not the same. And we don't need to act like everybody has the same opportunities. But we do have to work as an agency. We do have to work as a family. And we do have to take advantage of the opportunities we have. And we have to do that in earnest. And so that's where I would leave that discussion. We're going to be seeing a lot on diversity and equity. We're not only going to be looking at diversity of the workforce, but we're going to be looking at equity within the communities that we serve. And so this is a real big issue for the administration. And it's something that they are actually lining up staffs around being able to look at this and how well we're doing. And so while I think we're doing good, we're going to have to look at it and we're going to have to display how we're doing so that folks look at what are the opportunities and how are we taking advantage of the opportunities we have. So I'll leave it there, Angela. I don't know if you have anything to add on that, but that's kind of my perspective on that. And that's been my experiences there.
I have a lot to add, although I will add that there have been numbers, and the chief talked about the the number of people who are leaving the agency within a very short period of time. If that doesn't make us question what's happening and get curious about that, then I don't think we'll be doing our job well. And there are other pieces of data that stand out at this point that draw the same kind of attention. During the pandemic, we lost, in addition to already being on a little bit of a downward trend, we have lost gender women at representation in our ranks. We've lost people of color in our ranks. The data bears that out, and it's been in recent years, and you can't help but say what's happening here. And so we're going to have to really inquire into that, and would love the feedback from you about that, straight talk about from you about that as well, because I think you might have some clues as to what the experiences are in our workplace that are leading us to the numbers we're seeing.
Thank you, Angela. And I know we have a lot of motivated staffs that would love to dig in more and make some good progress here. So I think some of them are listening. So I look forward to them following up and helping us with that. So Chief, we're at the top of the hour. And I want to thank everyone for joining. I'm going to hand it over to you to close us out.
Well, thanks, Katie. And again, you know, thank you all for taking time out to be on this call and to really engage with us. And I would just say that, you know, as we go forward here with these new opportunities on the horizon, please let us hear from you. And Katie, I'm looking for you to maybe get some communication out to folks on how we can do that in a way where we can have some dialogue across the agency about what's taking place, because I do feel that we're going to have a lot of opportunities. I think it's really important that our employees have a voice in what's going on. And Sean, I'm looking to really work with you as a true partner in how we approach some of these things. And I think that the future is really bright. It's as bright as we allow it to be. And so I'm going to ask us to let's work together. Let's look beyond ourselves and trying to achieve some of the things that we're talking about, because I think it's in our best interest. We have the attention of people now that we have not had in a very long time. And here again, I keep repeating myself, but I want us to be strategic in the choices that we make in how we go about getting our work done. And we don't have to do it all ourselves. That if we work with others and through others, we are going to be successful, because we have some of the best minds there is out there when it comes to conservation matters. And so I'm going to die believing that. I've seen it many times. I'm convinced of that. And so I want to empower you all as employees to engage. And I'll say this at the beginning and I'll say it as I close. Don't look up for solutions, look around and within, because that's been our tradition. That's our DNA as an agency. And that's how we're going to continue to be successful moving into this new era of conservation in this country. So again, thank you all. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this first real dialogue and discussion with you as your chief.
Right. Thanks, Chief. Thank you, everyone. And we look forward to talking with you in our next opportunity.